Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to take a look at how the Hub World MMO example project handles register and login. Let's get started. First, we need to talk about login methods. The OWS 2's built-in login system is just for development and testing. Your production game will most likely use an external login provider. OWS 2 currently supports Epic Online Services, but more will be added in the future. OWS 2 supports OAuth 2, which is the most common external login provider scheme used by Steam, Zola, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and many, many more. Let's take a look at how to test the register and login APIs using Swagger. I always forget the URLs to access the APIs through Swagger. And so what I do is I just go to openworldserver.com and I click on the FAQ and it says, how do I access Swagger? Now, if OWS 2 is running, these localhost addresses will just open right up. So this is how I do it because I forget these numbers on the end. So here we go. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to click on authorize and enter our API key. I'm going to paste in the API key, which is the customer GUID column from our database. And I'm going to hit authorize. And you'll notice that this goes from an unlock icon to a lock icon. So always check to see if you're having any issues and that's showing as an unlock, it means you need to put in your API key. Let's start by registering a new user. We're going to use the RegisterUser API. We'll click on Try It Out. We need to enter an email, a password, a first name, and a last name. Make sure you leave the outside double quotes when filling it. Once you have the values entered, we're going to click Execute. We're looking for a response code 200, which means success. And you'll notice that it returns us 3 values. It returns authenticated, true or false. If it's false, we're going to have an error message. If it's true, the error message is going to be blank. And this also gives us our user session GUID. Now, this is a recent change. If you didn't update to the latest version of OWS 2 within the past couple weeks, you don't have this version and it does not return the user session GUID. But the reason that we did this is that previously when you registered, it kicked you back to the login and you had to log in. But what's the point of making you do that if you just registered? And so basically, register user is now register user and create session. Maybe in the future we'll rename that. So if you are watching this in the future, maybe you'll notice that there's a register and a register user and create session. And if that's the case, the register user and create session will be the one that's actually creating this user session GUID. Right now, though, register user is doing both registering the user and creating the session. So we're going to grab this user session GUID because we're going to need this for all the rest of the API calls that we make. So we're going to copy this and save it. Now that we've registered our user, let's call get user session. We can click try it out, paste in our user session GUID and hit execute. It's 200, it's a success. And you'll see that it has various fields from the users table, but you'll notice that it does not have a selected character name and additional info about that character. So the next thing we need to do is to create a character. So we're going to go to create character using default character values. This is the new character creation method that we're using in Hub World MMO. We're going to click try it out. We need to paste in our user session GUID. We need to put in our character name. And the default set name for Hub World is just default. Once we have that entered, we're going to hit execute. And we got back a success. And so now we're going to go back to get user session, and we're going to run it again. And you'll still notice that there's no selected character name and character info. So what we have to do is we have to actually call an API called setSelectedCharacter and get user session. And so we're going to try it out. We're going to paste in our user session GUID. And we're going to put in our character Dart34, and we're going to hit execute. We got a 200. And now you'll see it set the selected character name to Dart34. And because this is a two-part API that sets it and gets the user session, we now get back our character ID, and we get back our character name, and we get back the zone name. So there's the zone name right there, Hub World. That's the starting map it's going to put us at, and it's actually going to put us at 1510x, -160y, and 100z. Now we can log out and remove our user session from the user sessions table. We're going to hit try it out. We're going to paste in our user session GUID. And we're going to hit execute. And we get a success. And now if we go to our database and we show our user session GUIDs table, you can see it's not there. That was a previous one that I was testing there, Dart46, but we were not Dart46, we were Dart34. So we did have a user session GUID row in this table until I removed it by logging out. The RegisterUser API in OWS 2 takes the parameters email, password, first name, and last name, which are all strings. And then the output that comes back is authenticated, which is a true or false, user session GUID, which is a GUID, and then an error message. The error message is a string value, but it will be empty string whenever authenticated is true. If authenticated is false, the error message will tell us why did it fail to register. In a bit, we're going to take a look at how the validation works for registration, and that's what would output those error messages. The iPublic Input Validation interface in OWS 2 is what is used to add your own custom validation. Default public API input validation is an example implementation. When you build your own implementation, you'll need to go into startup.cs and modify which implementation you use. You can see here that the line is container.register, and it's matching up the iPublic API input validation with, in this case, default public API input validation, but it would be your input validation. Let's take a look at what a default public API input validation looks like and what yours might look like. The iPublic API input validation has methods for validating the character name, the email, the first name, the last name, and the password. The default public API input validation is just meant to be an example, and currently it only validates character name. You can see that we have two tests. The first test says, make sure that the character name is not empty, and also make sure that the length is 4 characters or more. So if we entered 1, 2, or 3 characters, we would get the message, please enter a valid character name that is at least 4 characters in length. The second test we do is that we want to make sure that we only allow character names that are a combination of upper and lowercase letters and numbers. And so we use a regular expression to do that. If someone tries to enter something that isn't an uppercase or lowercase letter or a number, they will get this error message. Please enter a character name that only contains letters and numbers. The Login and Create Session API in OWS 2 takes the parameters email and password, and the output is the same as the RegisterUser API in that it returns authenticated, true or false, user session GUID, which is a GUID, and in the case that authenticated is false, we get a string as the error message. We can test the Login and Create Session API from Swagger. Let's click Try It Out. You can see here that the username or password isn't is invalid. This is what happens when you enter the wrong username and password, is that you get a false, and then there's a reason in the error message. Now let's enter the right value. I made a mistake earlier when entering the email, maybe you noticed, in that I only made the email equal to Dart34, and I did not have a domain name on it. If we had email validation, this would have caught that, but we didn't, and so we're actually going to have to set it to the email, which is just Dart34, and hit execute. Now you can see that authenticated is true, and we've been given a user session GUID. Now let's take a look at register and login in the Hub World MMO example project. Register and login and create session BP nodes are in the OWS login widget. Our UI underscore register widget BP inherits from OWS login widget to get access to these BP nodes. After the RegisterUser API returns a user session GUID, we store it in BP underscore player controller. Then we open up the UI underscore create character widget BP. Okay, let's take a look at following the registration process all the way through. So I've gone here to all content BP login, and we have the UI register widget. And I've got this open. And you can see here that when the register button is clicked, this is what it looks like. When the register button is clicked, it calls this, and it calls the register API. So this is in OWS login widget CPP. If we go here, we can take a look, and you can see OWS login widget CPP, and I've set breakpoints in register and on register response received, the asynchronous callback. This is an asynchronous method, and what this means is that when it hits register, it does not wait for it to continue. It kicks off the API call, and whether it could ever finish this or not, it doesn't care. It doesn't stop. Some BP nodes, you don't get the output wire until it's done. This one, you instantly get the output wire. So the time from here to here is 0. It just instantly goes and just kicks this off on the side. Like all OWS 2 APIs, they come in the combination of an API call along with a notify and an error. What happens here is that when there is a success, this notify callback will get called, right? So we don't know how much time is between this and this. It could be, a couple milliseconds. It could be 10 seconds. We have no idea. It doesn't matter. And so what happens here is that it calls this notify on success, and it calls error when there's a problem. And so we'll look at the error first. It gets back an error message, and we get the player controller, and we pop up this message confirm dialog with that error message. In the case of the success, we get the player controller, cast to BP login player controller, which has a user session GUID, and we set the user session GUID. And then we call hide register and show create character dialog, which is just, a way to organize this to keep it a little bit cleaner, which basically just gets the player controller, and it hides the register dialog and shows the create character dialog. I could have just put this here at the end, but I was trying to keep things nice and clean. So now what we're going to do is we're going to follow this through, hit the C++ breakpoints, and step through it. We're going to make sure that our net mode is play as standalone and hit the play button. Okay, and we're going to hit the create account to open the register dialog. And we're going to put in Dart 18 at test.com with a password of 123456789. And we're going to hit register, and it's going to hit this breakpoint. So what I'm going to do to make it easier for you is on the right-hand side, I am going to show the memory. As we move from line to line, I will show you the changes in the memory. We have 3 columns: variable name, memory address, and value. The memory address is made up because I don't know what it could be, but I want to show you what it's doing behind the scenes. And we're going to step through. So we're going to start here on register. When we hit this line, we will allocate f-string email, f-string password, f-string first name, and f-string last name, and they will have the values from the BP passed in. So whatever values I entered. Next, we are allocating a structure, fRegisterJSON post, and we are sending in email, password, first name, last name. We're sending those values into it, and it is setting those in that constructor to those values. So we now have an fJSON post struct with those 4 values. We then have fstring post parameters, and we are setting this to an empty string. Now we are going to call ustruct to JSON object string, and we are sending in the registered JSON post. And you can see here that they show an ampersand here in the IntelliSense for post parameters. We are sending in the memory address of post parameters. This is often the case when you want to get a value back. You have to send in the memory location so it knows where to put the value. So we are not sending in the post parameters themselves, or the post parameters itself, which would just be empty string. We are sending in the address. And so once we follow that, we're going to go here to process OWS2 post request. We're sending in this API users register user, which is the API we want to call. This is a reusable method. We are sending in the post parameters. You can see here what that looks like, right? That's what we're sending in. And then we are sending in the address of the callback. Again, the address operator, the ampersand. The callback is on register response received, which is right here. This is what we're going to call back. So we're going to hit continue, and it's going to come back. So on register response received, we have to allocate an fHTTP request pointer. This is a class. Just because F's in front of it doesn't always mean it's a struct. In this case, it's a class. Same with fHTTP response pointer. This is a class. And we get back bool was successful. We're now allocating fstring error message. We're allocating a T shared pointer of type fJSON object called JSON object. And then we are calling this reusable method called getJSON object from response, where you send in the request, the response, was it successful or not? For any error message we send in, what method we're in. And then we send a address of this fstring error message, and we send an address of this empty JSON object that we want the JSON put into. And it puts it into it. See, there we go. We've got the values in this JSON object. We check if error message is empty. If it is not empty, we would have called this is the callback. That error register is the callback. I can't go to where I'm at right now, but we'll go take a look at what it is. Okay, we are now saying take this JSON object struct and JSON object and put it in the struct register and create session. We've created a T-shared pointer. We're allocating this f login and create session structure to put values into. We put the values into them. There they are. And now we would say, hey, if there was an error, we're also going to call the error pop-up and send the error message. But in this case, it was a success, and we're calling notify register. I jumped one too much. We're just going to hit continue. And in this case, what's happened is that I waited too long. And so it's kind of stuck because of how slow we're doing it. But it would have come back to the create character screen. It's just that unfortunately stepping through it here, we're taking longer than the timeouts are allowing. But here was that error register, and here was that notify register on success. I'm going to hit stop here. So now we have successfully stepped through the registration process. Now we're going to use that information that we just created to step through the login widget. So we'll go here and take a look at the login widget blueprint. And we'll go to the login button. And you can see here, same pattern. So when on either two things can happen, either we hit the button login, or after we've committed the password and there's a value in both of them, it will automatically go and do the same thing as clicked. So just makes it easier if you tab off that password and you've committed it and you have a valid email and password, it'll also be the same as clicking the login button. So we show the loading dialog, And then again, OWS login widget, we go here and we make the API call. That's asynchronous. We're going to go and move to the code here, get rid of that. We're going to jump up to the code. Here it is, login and create session. And on login and create session response received, we've got breakpoints on both of them. We're going to come back here. This is the success. On success, we call login complete, which continues the rest of the process, and we send it the user session GUID. This is in the BP login player controller, which is why we had to get the owning player controller cast to BP login player controller. And then when there's an error, we do pretty much the same thing we did before. We grab the player controller and we would show this message confirm dialog, but because we showed a loading dialog here, we have to hide a loading dialog. So with the registration, I don't know, maybe at some point we'll have some kind of like spinning icon or something that makes it let you know that it's doing something. Here, we're actually showing a loading dialog because we're going to end up going to a different screen on success. So it's a little bit different, but just about the same. So let's step through the login process. We're going to hit play. And we're going to use the values that we just created. And we're going to hit login. Okay, so same thing here. The values will be on the right. We hit login and create session. We're allocating an email and a password of type fstring. They're getting filled with the values from the BP. We create a struct, flogin and create session JSON post, which was the type, and it's login and create JSON post is the name, and we send in the email and password, fill the values. We have post parameters gets allocated type fstring, set it to empty string. We call ustruct to JSON object string, which sends in the structure, and then we send in the memory address to fill of post parameters. And we go to our reusable process OWS2 post request. We send in where we want to go, API/users/login and create session. We send in those post parameters that you can see here. And then we send in the address of the callback. Here's the callback. So it's actually it's the address of the code because the code actually sits in memory. And so we are going to hit continue and we're going to hit the callback. And so we have allocated an fHTTP request pointer called request, an fHTTP response pointer called response. Those are classes. And we have a bool was successful. We've allocated an fstring error message. We have allocated a tshared pointer to fjson object, which is a JSON object. And then we're going to call this reusable get JSON object from response. We send in the request, the response. Was it successful or not? We send in this value of the name of this in case there's an error. We use that in the error logging. And then we send in an address of error message, and we send in the address of JSON object because they're going to get filled. If the error message is not empty, we would show error login and create session callback and send the error message. We now create a tshared pointer of flogin and create session. That's a struct. And there it is, login and create session. We then say get struct from JSON object, and this is just the type. And we send in the JSON object. It converts it for us. It fills the struct with the values. There they are. And then if there was an error message, we show it by calling that callback. But we're instead calling notify login and create session. We hit continue. Again, we took too long, and so it's not going to go to the right place. But that would have gone to the it would have gone to the create character, because what happens at that point is when you log in, it looks to see if you have a character or not. If you already have one, it would go to the character detail widget, right? But in this case, since in both of those cases, the register and the login, since we don't have a character, it would actually take us to this character creation wizard where we have to put in the character name. So it would take us to this dialog. And so now that is how we have stepped through both the registration process and the login process. If you have any questions related to this video, please leave your questions in the comments section. The Open World Server and Hub World MMO Discord link is in the video description if you want to discuss something in this video further. Like and subscribe to be notified of future videos and to help with the algorithm. Until next time, have a good one.